What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about why I think 64-player Breakthrough and Conquest are so pivotal to the future of this game and why they need to be made permanent either now or at least early in 2022. For those who haven't checked it out, they have actually added 64-player Breakthrough and Conquest to the all-out warfare portion of Battlefield 2042. Obviously, just the other week they had added Rush as well, however that was actually in the portal area of the game, so a lot of people were actually confused about where this was initially added, but this is actually an implementation into the all-out warfare portion of the game. So even though it's not drastically different, it does feel a little bit more official when it is in that part of the game. And now that it's there, I do think that they really need to make this a permanent solution to the game, and we're going to be going over the reasons for exactly why I feel that way. Before we get into it, if you guys are new to the channel and you end up enjoying the video, then be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. So pretty much since the launch of Battlefield 2042, obviously it hasn't gone down too well with the community, and one of the things that I've seen being asked for quite a bit is the implementation of 64-player versions of Breakthrough and Conquest, as even though a lot of people are enjoying the 128-player versions, for a lot of people it is just purely too chaotic, and then for a lot of other people as well, it is messing with the optimization of the game quite a bit. Now, for me personally, I am one of those players who has really enjoyed 128-player Conquest, and more specifically 128-player Breakthrough. I absolutely love the sort of chaos of those modes, and although it does mean that your impact on the game is hardly anything in the grand scheme of things, I have had a lot of fun just running around and, you know, just having explosions all over the place and reviving 10 teammates who have just been down in the one spot. It's all just super chaotic, and for me personally, that is how I love Battlefield to be. So despite some of those optimization issues, I have had a blast with it so far. With that being said though, I have seen a lot of people in the community and myself as well wanting a 64-player version of this, mostly for me personally just to see how it goes compared to 128 players. But for a lot of people, it's not just a sort of temporary thing where it's like I want to see how it goes. For a lot of people, it's something that they actually need to enjoy the game, and so obviously with it being added recently, that is a great start at the very least. Now, it's only been added for around a day or two as I'm recording this. I've just played for about 2 hours before recording, and from what I've experienced so far and from what I've seen on Twitter in the last probably 24 hours, pretty much every single person that I've seen has said that this is a really positive thing for the game. It's not like it's an immediate fix for the game and now this is the best Battlefield of all time or anything like that, but essentially everyone is saying that this is a positive start and a positive direction for the game to be taking. And the only worry now is that we obviously don't want them to do what they've done with Rush, where it was there for a week or two and then essentially just removed and turned into essentially a limited time mode. Now, don't get me wrong, I do sort of understand the concept of limited time modes. They do help a lot with player retention, and when you have events and modes that are coming in, you know, over the course of a weekend or a week, something like Rush, for example, when that's added back into the game, that's going to draw a lot of people to the game, and it sort of creates these big events within the game, like, oh, my favorite mode's back, I'm going to jump in and play that all week. It does help with the game, and I'm all for limited time modes, but the issue with the way that they've been doing it with Rush and now seemingly with 64-player Conquest and Breakthrough is that, in my opinion, these should not be limited time modes. These are the core elements and the core modes that we've known for years and years and years in the Battlefield franchise. For me, Rush is arguably the most popular and most enjoyable game mode that I've ever played in Battlefield. Thinking back to the Battlefield 3 days, Rush is all I played, and then obviously Conquest is going to be one of those other modes as well that is just pretty much loved by the community, and in more recent times obviously Breakthrough is the same as that. Now obviously Breakthrough and Conquest are still in the game, it's just the fact that they're 128 players instead of 64, and although, like I said, a lot of people, myself included, have been enjoying that 128 player chaos, it definitely isn't for everyone, and I do get the concerns from a lot of people that just increasing the scale of the game because they can doesn't mean that it is actually a better thing for the game. One of the main complaints about this game pretty much since launch day is to do with the optimization. Obviously on a lot of consoles and PCs, it just isn't running the way that you would expect a AAA title to run. It's getting a lot of dropped frames, a lot of bugs, a lot of issues that seem to be to do with the absolutely enormous scale of the game. And although it is really awesome to see such huge maps and see 128 players in the same lobby, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to improve the game. The 64-player version, in my opinion, it does play a lot better. It not only runs a lot better, and I'm playing on the Series X, which to be honest hasn't had that many issues in 128 player lobbies, but even I can tell that it is running a lot smoother on the 64-player version of these game modes, and at least until they fix the optimization, which they've mentioned is going to take months and months to do, this is essentially a temporary little fix to just have 64-player variants, where sure, the players who are really enjoying 128 players might not enjoy it as much, but I'm pretty sure everyone's going to enjoy having the actual amount of frames per second that they're expecting to have rather than getting 30, 40, 50 frames a second. And so not only, in my opinion, does it play better, but the fact that it actually makes the game run better as well, that is yet another positive. Now, like I said, it is great that it's in the game now, and it does show that they are listening to the community. This is something that we have all essentially been crying for since the launch of the game, and the fact that it is already here in a month, that shows they have listened to us and they hear our concerns, and they are willing to actually change their initial plans to implement modes that, you know, they might not have initially planned to do. That's absolutely great, and that is the right direction for DICE to be taking, but putting it in temporarily isn't a permanent fix. In my opinion, these modes need to be made permanent. They are the core game modes of Battlefield, and I think 64 players is a nice sweet spot that's been proven over many games now that it does really work. So now that they've made the first step in just implementing these modes, the next step is to make them permanent in All Out Warfare. Now, with that being said, as great as the 64 player versions have been, I do still think there are some tweaks that they need to make to the modes as they currently are. One thing that I've noticed is that it feels like there are way too many vehicles compared to the amount of players. I don't know if they've actually scaled down the amount of vehicles allowed compared to the 128 player lobbies, but from the session I was just playing before recording this, like, I felt like every second player was in a vehicle. If you do know the ratio from 64 players to 128 players in terms of whether they've reduced that ratio or not, then definitely let me know down in the comments. But at least to me personally, it felt like there was way too many vehicles. Probably less vehicles, to be honest, than there are in 128 player lobbies, but for the ratio of players, it feels a little bit too much to me personally. And if they could reduce the amount of vehicles by, you know, 25%, even 50%, maybe that's a little bit too much, but I think reducing the amount of vehicles would make it play even better than it currently does, and would no doubt even help with the optimization even further, because obviously a lot of what probably causes the issues are actually vehicles with the explosions and shooting explosive rounds into players and stuff. That's a lot of what is actually causing the optimization problems. They do stem from the vehicles. So that's one thing that I think needs to be tweaked a little bit, is just reducing the vehicles, or maybe just increasing the respawn timers or something like that. And then speaking of respawn timers, I also think that the respawn timers for the actual infantry players needs to be reduced just a little bit. Obviously the respawn timers are there for balancing. In, say, breakthrough, you need to have a respawn timer for the defending team, because that allows the attacking team to actually have a chance to sort of get into those objectives. But it currently being 10 seconds does feel a little bit too long for me personally. I know it's been that way in previous games, but I do think that with a smaller mode you can probably reduce that without breaking the balancing of the game, and it allows players to get into the action a little bit quicker. So for me, the main tweaks they need to make are just to the vehicles and those respawn timers. But other than that, I do feel like the 64 player version is essentially better in every single way than 128 players, and that's coming from me, who, like I said, has actually really been enjoying 128 players. Now, with all of this being said, I do still think that they need to keep 128 player lobbies there as well. It seems the majority of the community are leaning towards 64 players as their, you know, their favorite version of the game, but there are definitely a lot of players that do prefer the 128 player lobbies. And I know for me personally, like when they add some new weapons, for example, I'd probably prefer to jump into 128 player lobbies to level up those weapons and try and, you know, just have a bit more chaos every now and then. So for me, the solution isn't replacing 128 players, it's just essentially adding 64 player variants into the game permanently. And I think that just gives everyone their own favorite mode to play. If you like the chaos, you can play 128 players. If you like a bit more of a, you know, what we're used to from Battlefield, you can play the 64 player lobbies. I do hear a lot of people saying that, you know, that splits the player base, and it does, you know, down the line that can cause a lot of issues, but I don't think it's nearly as big of an issue as a lot of people are making that out to be. And the other thing is that they've added those bots in there to essentially counteract that anyway. So they've already set up their systems to, you know, fill the lobbies until players actually join and stuff like that. Splitting the player base to me isn't that big of an issue, at least not until the very end of the game's lifespan. And so that's an issue for years down the line, in my opinion. I do get the concern, but for me, it's not that big of a deal. I'm very keen to hear what you guys have to say though, whether you guys are enjoying 64 players more than 128 players, whether you like both, and especially whether you agree or disagree that 64 players should be a permanent mode. Personally, I think it's an absolute must for the future of the game, but I'm definitely keen to hear what you guys have to say. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new to the channel, then be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on any upcoming Battlefield 2042 content. If you want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then do consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.